But look, the best part about it is we truly like love each other and we respect each other. We had the greatest time making this thing,
and I think people saw just how much fun we actually were having.
It's so true. It's so true. And when you see this movie, you do really see.
You see it and you understand it, and it's just it makes you walk away hopefully filled with love and joy and some people maybe tears.
Yeah.
Second, it's a enemies to lovers rom-com.
Love.
It's so
I love Glenn Powell too. I'm such a fan of both of you, and so I was very excited to know y'all doing a film, and I love it.
And it's based off of Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, and it's a modern take on it, and you cry, you laugh.
Yeah.
It's a really good time.
Oh my God, I thank you, because I miss movies like this. People don't make them enough anymore.
No.
They used to be like so like prevalent like all the time, but now they don't make it.
Yeah, we want a rom-com renaissance.
I
we
love
want to bring
a
people
rom-com.
to the theaters. We want them to have fun and enjoy themselves.
Yes.
There's big set pieces, like we're making the rom-com big again.
I love that.
Well, Kelly Clarkson, I don't. So if you've seen my Something Borrowed video, you'll know that I've had a long time beef with that movie. Mainly because the plot wants us to root for a woman who fucked her best friend's fiance because her best friend was a bitch, and one of my main gripes is the heavy-handed ways it vilified her bitchy friend as a cheap shortcut to empathizing with Rachel by default, without actually making Rachel an interesting or even likable character that we should be rooting for. Sometimes the plot of a film can piss you off so much that you can't stop thinking about it. And then there are movies that don't exactly make your blood boil or make you want to create sims based on the characters so you can kill them off with the extreme violence mod, which I definitely didn't do. But sometimes there are certain movies that you paid your $13 for and sat through for almost 2 hours, only to be instantly turned off by the opening scene, leading you to feeling disappointed, bored, and annoyed throughout the entire fucking thing. And that movie is Anyone But You. Only one other movie so far has left me with that feeling, and that was It Chapter 2, which I have to talk about one day. But that was a movie I was so excited to see since seeing the first chapter, and it disappointed me so much that I left looking sadder than Pennywise. My friend is the one who was most excited for Anyone But You because she loves rom-coms, like more than life itself. And she ended up seeing it first before I did. Unsurprisingly, she loved it. And she had high hopes that I would too when we decided to go see it together. I remember her telling me that someone else she knew who didn't really like rom-coms also enjoyed it. And that actually put me at ease because rom-coms are very hit or miss for me. When Harry Met Sally is probably my favorite rom-com of all time. It's just a perfect film, and I wait to watch it every year during the winter season, and it never fails to be so heartwarming and sweet and make me believe in love again until, you know, the movie's over and then I go back to my cynical self. All that to say that when my friend told me this, I was very curious to see how it would impress me. Before this, all I kept hearing was how this movie was reviving the rom-com genre and how excited people were about this movie. But I should have known better because I also struggle to enjoy most mainstream films because they just don't do it for me in the ways indie and cult movies tend to. Like, I've seen quite a few movies this year, more than I usually do because I'm usually too lazy to drive my ass to the theater. But Challengers was one of the few that I saw that made me feel like good movies might make a comeback after years of the film market being oversaturated with comic book movies. No shade to comic book fans, it's just I'm tired of them. I'm tired of them. And I'm also tired of movies being overhyped and not actually delivering in the end. The actors were constantly talking about how this movie was bringing back the big budget rom-com, and many critics were reiterating that point in their praise of the film. But when I tell you that the first 11 minutes of this movie were so disenchanting, I do not use that word lightly. I spent the entire movie with a stone face, and I wanted to leave the theater and go home. Like I said, I've seen a few movies this year, but even the ones that weren't memorable or didn't make me want to rewatch them afterward, some of them were at least entertaining, and I didn't have a bored and frustrated viewing experience or feeling like I'd wasted 2 hours of my precious life. So let's talk about it. So as I mentioned before, the opening of the film before we get to the title sequence is 11 minutes long, and it's 11 minutes full of underwhelming nothingness, if you will. The film starts with B, played by my big-breasted queen, Sydney Sweeney, running to the cafe to use the restroom, but the cashier says she has to buy something first. B informs her that it's illegal for them not to let her use their restroom, but the cashier doesn't give two fucks because policy. This is when we meet Ben, played by Glenn Powell, who is waiting in line and overhears what is going on. He clearly feels he must rescue this hot woman, so he pretends to be her husband so that she can be a part of the purchasing class. She thanks him. He comments on her knowledge about bathroom laws and hands her the cute bathroom key. That's a cute keychain. I like that it's like a scoop with coffee grinds in it. He says he'll have her tea waiting for her, and she's like, "See you on the other side.
See you on the other side."
Now, there are much funnier ways that this next scene could have gone, but unfortunately it's very predictable, which isn't unlike most rom-coms, but it's not even like a fun or funny predictable. See, B is supposed to be clumsy, which can relate, girl. I am clumsy as fuck, and I always appreciate some clumsy girl representation, but the way her clumsiness is often displayed feels very forced. Be prepared to hear that word a lot, because after using the bathroom, B calls her friend to tell her about the hot guy pretending to be her husband, until she accidentally sprays herself with water, making it look like she peed her pants. Ben overhears and asks if she's okay, and she says,
Big time! I'm big time okay!
Big time okay. Okay, yeah, the dialogue is not big time okay. When she returns to him, he hands her her tea and they part ways. Until Ben, who sees that B has some toilet paper stuck to her boot, calls after her and...
So are you gonna ask me out now?
Yeah.
Alrighty. So they hang out, get to know each other, and walk through the park together. This is all through montages with music playing over the sequences, which I instantly clocked as very bad storytelling when I first saw this. Would have been nice to hear those conversations. We don't know these people. Later that night, they end up at his apartment where he makes her a grilled cheese sandwich that she immediately bites into. This is what makes her quirky, biting into hot food. She asks him about this large wrench that she sees displayed on his bookshelf, and he says that it was a gift from his mom, who said,
"No matter how broken something is, there's always a way to fix it."
Too bad you couldn't fix the plot of this movie, am I right? More music plays over the scene as she sits atop his lap and they fall asleep together on his couch. The next morning, B, for some reason, sneaks out of the house while Ben is still knocked out. She calls her friend and tells her about the night she had, but stops when she realizes, wait a minute, I didn't even fuck him yet, what am I doing? So she goes back. Meanwhile, Ben has woken up to see that B is gone, to his dismay. His roommate Pete comes in and notices the wrench is out, because I guess he doesn't typically pull out the old wrench.
You told her about your mom, bro? You don't tell nobody about your mom. Fuck, dog. You in love, man.
B makes it back, but before he can even see her, he shit talks her.
This girl's a disaster. She's a nothing.
B leaves and walks past a Shakespeare quote. Very subtle. 6 months later, at a nightclub, we are introduced to Pete's sister Claudia and her girlfriend Hallie, who is revealed to be B's big sis. This leads to B and Ben reuniting, still resenting each other over the dumbest misunderstanding I've ever seen in a movie. B reveals that she's engaged to a guy named Jonathan, who she was on a break from when she almost hooked up with Ben. They begin arguing with each other as Claudia, Hallie, and Pete listen on from a distance. Ben calls her out for sneaking out on him, and she calls him out for being a fuckboy. And this is how the movie decides to officially start the movie.
Then I'm gonna get a drink and toast to never seeing you again.
Cheers to that, bro.
Was that not the driest thing ever? Now, I'm no screenwriter, but the writing for this movie is terrible from the beginning. First off, Sydney Sweeney, my girl, love you, but
See you on the other side.
this is not your lane. I'm sorry. I'm not the first person to say this, but good God, she was definitely a huge part of why this movie didn't work for me. I think she works really well in dark dramas and horror movies. I loved her in Immaculate, but she is not a rom-com girly to me. Second, the chemistry, or the absence of chemistry more like. Obviously everyone is entitled to their opinion, and like, if you thought their chemistry was just off the charts, then okay, that's fine. But I didn't see it then, and I don't see it now. One of the reviews I read noted how the scenes between Glenn and Sydney feel bland, like they're just reading lines but not putting a lot into them, and I kind of agree. I just wasn't, rooting for them, like, at all. And I think rooting for the romantic leads is a pretty important part of a rom-com, Sydney and Glenn are both conventionally hot, and the movie is riding on that way too much. Two hot people in a scene together doesn't automatically equal chemistry. unfortunately. There is no part of these first 10 minutes where I feel connected to these characters, or feel that I have any reason to care about their relationship, or them for that matter. We get a boring meet cute, and then they just cut to them walking and talking, but we can't hear what they're even talking about, and since the movie doesn't really reference these silent conversations later, I guess we can deduce that they were just discussing the weather, because they only reference the conversation they had in his apartment. They try to get us to emotionally connect with Ben with the wrench thing, but no. And I feel like we learn nothing of note about Bee's personality other than that she's unsure about becoming a lawyer. Friends with Benefits, which is directed by the same guy, does a much better job with the meet cute between Mila Kunis and Justin Timberlake. And that movie sucks, even though I kind of love it, not gonna lie. But I'm using them as an example because their relationship develops pretty well within the first day they spend together. And this movie just presses the fast forward button and expects us to just feel the gravity of this misunderstanding. Not that Bee isn't within her rights to be mad at him for calling her a nothing, which was very over the top, by the way. I know he admits later that he was just hurt because she left, but it still didn't feel natural or cohesive. What else didn't make sense is why Bee left. Again, they explain later why she left, because she was scared. And I know it's a rom-com, and so there are going to be things that are just going to feel a little forced and unrealistic. But this was way too forced to me. And then there's a club scene that leads into the title sequence. So this movie is rated R. It's supposed to be a steamy rom-com, but it does not contain any sexiness or steam. None of their arguments or fight scenes are sexy, and they don't make me feel like they should jump each other's bones. They should have had Challengers level sexiness, and they just didn't, and that is such a detriment to this film in my opinion. Drying is the best way to describe how I felt when the misunderstanding took place. It just didn't make sense writing-wise, and this would carry over into everything else that happens between these two people. The rest of the movie centers around Ben and Bee having to reunite 2 years later, apparently, in Australia to attend the wedding of her big sis Hallie, who was getting married to Claudia. They first reunite when they end up on the same flight, where they have another boring back and forth.
No, thank you. I'm all good on creatine and small dick insecurity.
Nothing small about me. What the fuck?
I'm sorry, but Bee's insults of Ben are so basic, like fuck boy, small dick, like come on. This is why it would have made more sense writing-wise if we saw more of their conversation so she could insult him with her insights into his actual personality. Like, how do you know he's a fuckboy? You barely know him. Everyone meets up at Pete and Claudia's mom and stepdad's beach house, and this is where we meet Bee and Hallie's parents, who are still saddened by the dissolution of Bee's engagement to Jonathan, who at one point was like family to them. They were hoping she would be the one getting married now, but Bee begs them to please lay off of her. Along the way, we meet Margaret and her boobs, who we learn is Ben's ex, and that Ben might still have some feelings for her. This intensifies when he meets her mate, Beau.
Hi, mate.
A dinner party is held at the beach house, and Bee and Ben are forced to interact with each other by, again, making lame insults at each other while playing charades.
Fuckboy. Your ego.
Things reach a tipping point when Ben tries to cheat using a prop, which is a firecracker. Bee doesn't like cheating, so she tries to take it back from him for some reason, even though the guy already guessed what it was, so why are you doing this? Anyway, they fight over this dumb firecracker and it ends up going off and launches into Claudia and Hallie's floral thingy with their initials on it. Since Margaret's only purpose is to be naked, I guess, she takes off her dress to put the fire out. Claudia and Hallie complain that these fuckwads are going to ruin their wedding, which just fucking tell them to get over themselves or leave, because the reason they hate each other is fucking stupid anyway. Roger and Carol, who are Pete and Claudia's parents, decide they're old and they want to get involved in some young people mess. So they help them plot to get Bee and Ben together. Their plan is to talk super loud about them within earshot.
Talking about dick.
All of their attempts to get them together are very dumb, and Bee is at least smart enough to catch on. Later on, Carol asks Ben and Bee to swim out to the ocean together and retrieve Roger's sunglasses he left on the sailboat. The fuck? They swim out there, which is where we learn Ben can't swim and is hot girl fit. They arrive at the boat, and Bee spots her parents from a distance walking down to the beach with her ex-fiance Jonathan, and this pushes Bee to come up with a plan to get her parents off her back. She proposes that they masquerade a situationship, so her parents can fuck off and Margaret can get jealous and leave her beau for him. He only agrees to it after she slaps his dick. The next day, everyone is getting ready to go on a hike, and Ben and Bee badly pretend to be a couple.
We're coming, Jinx, you owe me a Coke. Oh, yeah.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. If I was any of these people and I heard them playing an incredibly outdated game like Jinx, I would have clocked that shit immediately. Jonathan enters the scene with Bee's parents and he realizes that her parents completely bamboozled him and put him in an extremely awkward situation. Bee introduces him to Ben and states that they are dating, which shocks her parents. So Bee and Ben during the hike try to come up with ideas for a backstory because Bee's parents know that she would never date someone like him. Claudia expresses how she can't believe her parents invited Jonathan, and Hallie comments on how Bee has been at a low point and that she doesn't even know what happened to Bee going to law school. After Bee rejects Ben's idea to just suck face because she feels it should be more realistic, they decide to do something extremely unrealistic like sticking their hands in each other's pants and assholes, because that's definitely something I've seen couples do when they show PDA. Bee ends up pulling a spider out of his ass, and so Ben decides to take off all of his clothes and throw them over a cliff, like a smart person would do. Listen, if a spider was in my pants, I for sure would have taken my clothes off because I do not fuck with spiders, but I wouldn't throw them over the cliff. Now, another thing that took me out of this film was the clear age gap between Sydney and Glenn, but they at least, unlike rom-coms of the past, acknowledge the age gap instead of ignoring it as if we couldn't tell. Bee learns that Ben's mom passed away, and she pulls him aside to ask him if the wrench thing was bullshit, but he says it wasn't. Jonathan and Bee play giant chess together while politely discussing how silly her nosy parents are, and he assures her that him being there was all their idea. She thanks him for being cool, and he tells her it's really good to see her. And I just really wish they'd rewritten this. Jonathan's presence doesn't raise any stakes or propose a threat to Bee and Ben getting together. This whole engagement backstory is so pointless to me and doesn't add anything to the story in my opinion. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, drinking Australian coffee, Ben and Margaret discuss why they split up. Apparently Ben was an immature drongo.
Smothered in X body spray.
But Maggie's like, smells like you're not that guy anymore. But this sends Ben into a panic. He can't have Maggie thinking he and Bee are serious because then she won't want to go against girl code. So he insists that they make it clear that this is just a situationship, not anything serious. The next day, they all prepare to get on a yacht. Ben is once again reminded that Bee is a baddie. Pete at one point calls her a Polly Pocket, which did make me laugh because she does kind of look like Polly Pocket. As Jonathan and Bee reminisce, her parents were way too into their daughter's relationship. Like, I'm sorry, but I totally understand if she just dumped him despite her weird parents. I would not want my mom this invested in my love life because I think he's perfect. But Roger correctly notes that she probably doesn't want to date her brother. After a jealous Ben pulls Bee to the dance floor, Bee feels they need to do something so corny and so lame so people will really see how infatuated they are with each other. Which doesn't make any sense to me because they were just talking about how they needed to play up the fact that they weren't serious, but whatever, this is what fuck buddies do, I guess. Yes, they do the classic, I'm flying, Jack. I'm flying into the water. Why would he jump off like that? You're supposed to slowly get down and then help her down, you stupid asshole. Sorry, but not enough people focus on how he jumped down and was about to just leave her ass. Anyway, he jumps into the water to rescue her as the boat continues to sail away, and no one on the boat is aware at first that they've potentially fallen to their deaths. I wish they would have been a better ending, honestly. Once they realize what has happened, they notify the authorities. Ben and Bee manage to climb up on a buoy, leaving them to have another deep conversation about their lives and to clarify the misunderstanding that got us here in the first place. This is where Bee says her relationship with Jonathan was too comfortable and that she hasn't told anyone that she quit law school. He asks why she snuck away. She says she was scared. He admits that calling her a nothing was mean and that his feelings were just hurt. Bee points to the Sydney Opera House across the pond and says that she would like to visit it in the daytime. I wonder if this is gonna come back later. The only thing this movie does an okay job of making a callback to is when they sing Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield as they are lifted into a helicopter. Earlier, when Bee tried to steal his cooking on the plane while he was asleep, which don't blame her, she overheard him listening to that song. But not to be such a negative Nancy, it didn't really give me the feels. I remember having fantasies about sticking pins in my eyes. After they return to the beach house wrapped in foil, Ben makes her a grilled cheese that she bites into immediately, like their first date. Also, he blows on her mouth to cool off the chewed food, and I'm sorry, but don't blow your fucking breath in my face. That is not sexy. They start making out and have sex in the shower. Through montages, as music plays over the scenes, making them incredibly boring and unsexy. I want to share this quote from someone named Alicia Mogul, I think that's how you say it, in a review she wrote for this film. She says this of Sydney and Glenn's kissing scenes. Sweeney and Powell kiss in an exaggerated, open-mouthed way from the start. like fish gasping out of water. It's a kissing that's more like the way a child thinks grown-ups kiss, having learned the action from a soap opera. Accurate. After they have sex, Ben says she's pretty good at faking it, and B says, I don't even know what's real anymore. So Ben decides this bitch is too undecided for me and sneaks out. B is of course upset about this when she wakes up to find that he's gone. The next day is the wedding day. B and Margaret go to pick up the giant cake and Ben and Pete go to pick up the flowers. Pete urges him to stop being a fuckboy and go for B, who's got an ass you can bounce a quarter off of. While at the cake shop, Margaret asks her if she can have a go at Ben, which I appreciate. Love when women have that respect for each other. B reluctantly says that she knows he really likes her. B and Maggie struggle to carry Claudia and Hallie's huge wedding cake and are intercepted by her parents, who reveal that they know about her quitting law school and are upset. I don't understand why they couldn't have just waited until after the wedding, but we need conflict, so I get it. B jumps to the conclusion that Ben told them, because he was the only one she told, but when Ben enters the scene, he says he told Pete, but...
When you told Pete, Pete told us.
I told you what? Yeah, no, I told Pete, but I didn't mean it like that.
So did Pete tell them? I don't understand.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
It doesn't matter how we found out.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay. B is pissed, so she confesses to their fake situationship and says she could never be with someone like him. The dog ends up knocking down the cake, Claudia gets angry, and B apologizes. For what? I don't know. Another contrived conflict that makes no sense. Everyone disperses and gets ready for the wedding. Ben overhears Claudia and Hallie having the most lazily written fight ever that I'm convinced this was just them faking another conversation to get Ben and B to stop acting like assholes.
Celebrate us, and they are ruining it. And all weekend I have been so stressed, and you've been more worried about what's going on with B than with me. Well, you've been more concerned about your planning. Are you marrying me or your itinerary?
Ben feels guilty and tells B they need to fake one last thing. So they pretend to have made up, and Claudia threatens them with a knife if they fuck up one more thing. Should have threatened them earlier, would have saved us a whole movie. Claudia and Hallie give the corniest and straightest vows ever.
You are the yin to my yang, peanut butter to my jelly.
I'm sorry. They're reading their vows and they're pulling this like Wedding Crashers parody, like, you're the yin to my yang, you're the peanut butter to my jelly. No lesbian is gonna say that bullshit at the altar when they're getting married. I refuse to believe that two women in love are gonna be that generic and fucking cliche and lame. Absolutely not.
I'm not even a lesbian and I am deeply offended by how they wrote the only gay couple in this film. So fucking boring. This is also the first time we actually see them kiss for real. Like, it's 2023, why are we still writing side gay couples like this in movies? Not sure if the director was just uncomfortable showing two women kiss or if the actors were uncomfortable kissing. Either way, don't put a gay couple in your movie if you're not gonna show them making out in the same way you show the straight people making out. Just saying, it's pretty glaring. B talks with her parents, who apologize for being batshit crazy. Everyone eats the ruined cake, which I did like because listen, a cake is a cake no matter how ugly. Margaret and Ben dance, and she tells him this trip made her realize she missed him. B watches on and gets upset. So she asks the girls if she can leave and take a walk. Another cliche conversation takes place when Ben says, I thought I wanted this, but I realized I was just holding on to a memory. Pete and Roger try to get Ben to go after B by loudly talking from a distance again, but Ben has had it. He's tired of the loud talking and the overhearing. He doesn't even know what's real or fake anymore. Wait, didn't we just hear B say that earlier?
This entire weekend, I've been lied to and manipulated and puppeteered.
What the fuck are you talking about? No, you haven't. You and B agreed to this masquerade. You were in on it together and you fully knew what this was. I genuinely do not understand what he's talking about. Roger says love is too precious a resource to be wasted. And the rest of the gang inform him that B left because she saw him and Mackie dancing. Carol just pops up out of the blue and is just like, run, don't wait on love. Once Claudia mentions B wanted to go and people watch, Ben is like, I know exactly where she is. So he gets on a helicopter and swims to her. It's a callback, if you didn't notice. B sees what is happening and cries tears of joy. He runs to her and tells her all of the things he loves about her, like the way they fight and how smart she is. Said no man ever. And he loves how she doesn't know what she wants, which is the classic rom-com line that has always perplexed me.
I love how smart you are. I love the weird way you stick your hands down my pants, and I
love the way you have teeth and hair. I love that you wake up every day. And I love that you drink water.
B says,
So you gonna kiss me now?
They make out. We transition to them back on the dance floor, which, where did Margaret go? Did she leave? Because that would have been awkward. Someone puts on Unwritten and the movie closes with the cast singing the song together as to convince you that you just watched something that is worthy of a moment like this. The end. I hate it. So I know that was a very negative and scathing review, but as I always say in my bad movie reviews, I am not criticizing anyone who enjoyed this movie. If you cried like Sydney hoped you would, I'm happy for you. I'm glad you had a better time than I did. But I want to touch on something that has really irked me when it comes to rom-com discourse. Anyone But You at best has Netflix movie quality, and for some reason it was put in theaters. And because it was put in theaters, it gave it more validity than something like The Idea of You. It was taken more seriously, and that's a shame. Because the movie is so lazy, so paint by numbers, and so forgettable. But I feel like some people would chime in to say, well, it's a rom-com, of course it's going to be predictable and lazy. And I just find that to be so irritating. As a wise woman once said,
we need to bring back the rom-com, prestige rom-com revival 2024. Rom-coms used to win Oscars.
Rom-coms used to be good. They used to be memorable. So memorable that they were considered prestigious even. But why now, since rom-coms became so predictable and formulaic since, I would say, the early to mid-2000s, are we now viewing rom-coms as a silly, unserious genre that isn't worth criticizing? Is it because the genre has mostly been enjoyed by female audiences? Yes it is. Why give these movies quality if the girls are gonna come and swoon regardless of how shitty the writing is, right? Well, some of us girls actually want quality in their rom-coms, and maybe if more effort was put into this script, we could have gotten something at least halfway decent.
It wouldn't have been that hard to bring this up to the level of okay.
I find it insulting that people will bank on the fact that women will come in droves and enjoy the movie anyway, and therefore don't feel any need to write a well-written movie. Sydney Sweeney might not be a rom-com girly, but they could have at least made Bea a more fleshed out character. The way they want us to relate to her is by her constantly calling Ben a fuckboy. We've all been with those, right? So naturally we know exactly how she feels. Except we don't, because Ben is not even a well-written fuckboy, and her constantly calling him that means nothing and has zero bite to it. Ben keeps making jokes about her being a disaster, comparing her to a car crash at one point.
I think you do feel like you can't leave me alone.
Same reason I slowed down at a car crash.
How is she a disaster? Because she doesn't want to go to law school? It just feels really forced because there is no indication of her being a disaster. Not knowing what career path to take does not make you a disaster. It's not like she has financial problems or she's always getting dumped by guys. She's just a young 25-year-old still trying to figure it out. Speaking of, the careers of both Ben and Bea are so under-discussed and vague that I'm seriously wondering how they could afford those outfits. What is Bea's job if she's not a lawyer? What does she currently do for money? Does her family just send her an allowance? What does Ben do? Why did Ben's mom gift him a giant wrench? I know he said it was because of some sayings she had about being able to fix anything, but does this relate to some skill he has? Is he a fixer? Like, what is the significance in this giant wrench? So much of Ben and Bea's personality is consumed by their ridiculous hatred toward each other. That is the only thing that's driving them and the only reason we're supposed to be rooting for them in the end. But the movie falters in not writing a more convincing conflict between the two. Bea doesn't have a female friend to confide in. Almost all of her scenes are between her and other men. This contributes to her character feeling very empty. Like, who was that friend she was calling on the phone? Who the hell was that? And why do we never meet her or hear her? It's so fucking weird. Ben gets a funny friend, why doesn't Bea? The movie tries to implement every rom-com trope, hoping that we'll just eat it up and not think too hard about it. Like in the beginning, after they arrive in Australia and Bea and Hallie are talking on the beach. Hallie expresses that she and her parents were worried about her due to the engagement being called off. And then Bea is like, I'm deprogrammed, I'm free now.
I'm deprogrammed. That does not mean I don't support you and your misguided view that soulmates exist.
Now, becoming cynical about love after one failed relationship isn't unrealistic. But because every rom-com girly is a girl who has fallen out of love with love, they write this same trope for Bea, but it just doesn't work. It's not like she's been with a lot of guys and has a long history of failed relationships. Plus, her relationship with Jonathan ended because he was boring, I guess. It wasn't like it ended with him cheating on her and breaking her heart. If Bea was maybe shy or had social anxiety and a fear of being hurt, that could have added more plausibility to this whole deprogram thing. Now, what about the other characters? As Brie Deschanel put so well in her video discussing this movie, they feel underwritten or unwritten, rather, especially Claudia and Hallie. I do not once have any care in the world about their relationship, nor do I care about their wedding day not being ruined. Claudia at least gets to deliver some funny, bad dialogue.
I need some help instead of this easy breezy Martin Scorsese.
But Hallie is dry as fuck, has no personality or substance. All she does is comment on how she doesn't know what's going on with B. This is why everything feels so contrived. They needed Hallie to be B's sister, so there would be a reason for them to reunite. But they neglected to make us care about her. We don't really see the relationship between B and her sister, leading us to think that they're not very close. Pete certainly stands out far better than anyone else in this movie because he at least has one personality trait.
I am the token black guy. I'm just supposed to smile, stay out of the conversation, and say things like, damn, shit, and that is whack.
But the way other characters interact with him feels very off. He has a lot of one-liners and jokes, but it doesn't ever feel like anyone has a real connection with him. Even his own sister. Like, I know I just said Ben at least has a friend, unlike B, but we hardly see him and Ben together. We don't actually see their bond or why they're even friends. B's parents both feel like one character with one brain. They both agree to do something very inappropriate and kind of disrespectful by inviting B's ex-fiance without telling her. They both continue to guilt trip her about her engagement ending and how they were hoping she'd be getting married. I just find it strange that they wouldn't have a disagreement or that one of them wouldn't try to be like, hey, let's back off maybe. They just don't have distinctive, memorable personalities or deliver any memorable lines like Carol and Roger do. Also, them having the nerve to get mad at her for not telling them about law school when they fucking ambushed her with Jonathan. And then poor Jonathan just like disappears towards the end. There's no real closure between him and B, and his presence in the story just feels useless. He also seems to lack personality traits like everyone else. And then there's Carol and Roger. Carol's purpose is to be the profound advice giver, which is not an uncommon trope in many movies, and her and Roger at least seem somewhat charming, and so I didn't exactly hate them as much as I hated everyone else. Besides Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell being hot, another main driver of this film is the fact that it's based on a Shakespeare play, Much Ado About Nothing. This is the movie's way of calling back to previous rom-coms of the late 1990s and early 2000s, from Cool Intentions to Romeo plus Juliet to 10 Things I Hate About You. Now, I'm not Shakespeare, okay? I am not an expert on Shakespeare.
Shakespeare, love.
In fact, I'm not super familiar with Shakespeare's work other than the plays we had to read in high school, so I can't speak to that. But many reviews I read kept comparing this to the Shakespeare-inspired films that we remember more fondly. And I think the movie was hoping that tying Shakespeare to it would make it seem more cogent and get it more attention. It literally opens with B walking past a Shakespeare quote after hearing Ben call her a nothing. I'm assuming for anyone who didn't go to the Wikipedia page beforehand to find that this movie was based on Shakespeare. And while I do believe that that was very heavy-handed, it maybe would have been more impactful if the opening of this movie was written better. Speaking of writing, so since I just spent this whole video being negative, I thought I'd end with a little bit of optimism. I wish I'd done this with my Something Borrowed video because while I hate that movie, I mostly hate how it's written. A romantic story centered around two people getting together as a result of an affair is interesting, and I think if it was more of a romantic drama, if Rachel was written better, if Darcy was written as an actual human being and not someone we're just supposed to hate, and if Dex had a personality, it could have been a good movie, or at least less hateable. To repeat, I'm no screenwriter, but I do have some suggestions on what could have made this movie more fun to watch. For one, rework the entire opening. I'm stealing this from a random podcast I found talking about this movie called The Broad Perspective, but something they say is that the beginning would have been so much funnier if the reason B had to go use the bathroom at a cafe and not, her workplace is because she had to take a shit. That could have endeared her to us, could have made her more relatable than just spraying herself with water. It would have made for a good, gross joke, like her stomach's rumbling as she's talking to him. She has to fart, and then when she goes to the bathroom, she has to hurry so he doesn't catch on to the fact that she's taking a dump. 2. Let us get to know them first, before they start disliking each other. Take out the montages and the music, and let us hear what they're talking about. Give us depth into what this connection was that was so profound that it made them hate each other for over 2 years. Maybe instead of just being confused about going to law school, B is also facing pressure from her parents to get married. We've already seen that they're nosy and weird, so why not just lean into that? At least then we can understand why B got bored with Jonathan because her parents felt he was perfect. Ben could actually have a job that relates to his personality somehow, like him being a mechanic or an engineer. I don't know, at least then the wrench would make more sense story-wise. And since they keep having B call him a fuckboy, maybe actually show him being a fuckboy instead of just saying it. Have Margaret bring up how he had lots of women in his phone or something, and mention how that was part of why they broke up. I also would rework the Natasha Bedingfield song. What would have been corny but cute is if in the beginning, as they're getting to know each other at his apartment, they start listening to some of their old favorite songs that they grew up with. Maybe B is going through his Spotify playlist and sees this song and starts playing it as a joke, but then they both get really into it and sing it together. That way at the very end, when they and everyone else start singing it on the dance floor, it would serve as a callback. 3. We work the misunderstanding into an actual legitimate fight. Have them actually sleep together and bring up the fact that she was on a break from Jonathan. The next morning, they wake up and her phone starts ringing, and they both see someone named Jonathan. Ben's like, "Who's Jonathan?" And then she has to confess that he's her boyfriend, but that they're on a break. This would cause Ben to get angry because later on in the movie, he makes a comment about how
Woman who cheated on her fiance.
We were on a break, asshole.
You're either broken up for good or you're cheating. Either way, someone's lying to someone.
So maybe he doesn't believe in the idea of taking a break. So he gets upset because he's just had this great date with her, and now he feels she might be lying. Then B sees his phone going off and it's Margaret. He's still seeing her off and on, revealing that they both failed to be upfront with each other. We could see them fight and name call each other while they're putting their clothes back on. He or she says something that goes too far, causing B to leave. P can come home like normal, but B realizes she left her jacket. She goes back and hears him say something very personal that cuts deep, something she never told anyone, and that's what makes her resent him. I would also change how the wrench was implemented. Have B go to the bathroom and then snoop in his room or something. Or he asks her to get something from his room and she sees it and is like, "What is this?" And then asks him about it. Because in the movie, it doesn't really make sense that Pete makes it a point to say that he never pulls out the old wrench when it's just sitting on his bookshelf for everyone to see. It's not like he put it away because it reminded him too much of his mom. 4. Make better sex scenes. Every one of their kiss scenes is just, they get close to each other, and they're instantly making out. He picks her up, and then music, montage, the end. Lame. There aren't enough shots that indicate to us that they're even attracted to each other once they get to Australia. Like, yes, they're supposed to be mad at each other, but they're also supposed to still be attracted to each other on some level, I assume. We don't really see that, and that's part of why their alleged chemistry is not jumping off the screen for me. I don't understand why the sex scenes in this movie feel like PG-13 sex scenes. I'm not saying it has to be like Poor Things or anything. The scene on the cliff where they rub each other's butts in giant circles? Why? What a waste. That could have easily been a moment where sexual attention could have been incorporated. If they actually cuddle and maybe he puts his hand on her butt and they lay their heads on each other's shoulders and they are now forced to be intimate. And they look at each other, there's a spark, and then the spider can enter the picture, effectively ruining the moment. Cliche maybe, but it would have been better than this. 5. Give Jonathan more relevance, and also a personality while we're at it. I think if Ben is supposed to be a fuckboy, they could have connected that to Jonathan. Maybe Jonathan also used to be a fuckboy and cheated on B, and that's why they had an on and off relationship because they're in their 20s. It would have been very realistic. Jonathan could have gotten word that B was going to be in Australia for a wedding, so he gets in touch with her mom, who loves him, and asks if he can come and surprise her. But B is still hurt over how Jonathan treated her and hates that her mom wants her to be with him, because maybe her mom doesn't know that he sucks, and so this is why she comes up with the plan to fake a relationship with Ben. It's possible the reason this movie didn't have Jonathan be a romantic obstacle is because they didn't want to do like a love triangle, which is fair, but then why is Jonathan here? He literally poses no threat. They make a big deal about him seeing her and Ben be intimate, but he doesn't actually seem to give a fuck. So just do the love triangle.
The math of love triangles isn't hard to learn.
Have him tempt B to take him back, and have this be what pushes Ben to stop being a fuckboy, because he realizes he doesn't want to lose her again to Jonathan like before. You see, it all comes full circle. 6. Write a better lesbian couple. Alexandra Shipp and Hadley Robinson did not have any chemistry. Their scenes are not cute and they're boring. Lesbians deserve so much more representation in mainstream cinema, as well as black women who are queer. And it's so disappointing that they wrote them this way. I know I said it earlier, but they never kiss or act like they're even excited to get married. When they kiss after saying their vows, it is the most decom kiss I've ever seen. For Hadley, I'd write her to be like B's best friend. They confide in each other and tell each other things they've never told their parents, like the law school thing. During the yacht party while Ben and B are dancing, have Hadley get a little tipsy and accidentally tell her parents that B dropped out of law school. No one seems to have a job in this movie, and they never tell us what Hadley and Claudia's jobs are, even though they're about to start a life together. Anyway, so let's make her a lawyer. The lawyer thing can just be something the parents really pushed on their daughters. Give Hallie a dark sense of humor, who also tends to be a little cynical and laid back, and then make Claudia the more optimistic and positive one. She's the one who makes sure everything is together, and that's why she's obsessed with following the itinerary so closely. And this is what causes conflict between them, making their argument at the end feel more organic. B, being Hallie's sister, could add to Claudia's frustration with B and Ben being assholes. Claudia fears they'll fuck up their plans, but Hallie doesn't want to confront her sister because they're so close. Also, maybe cast two women who actually have chemistry. Seems to be a real problem with this movie. 7. Pete and Margaret. Pete can still remain as the comic relief, I guess, but give him some depth other than just uttering funny one-liners. He just feels like some random dude who just tagged along on someone else's vacation. If Pete has to be single, maybe have him talk about that. Maybe he enjoys casual sex and just likes to be chill and fun. Give him more scenes with his sister. They don't have to be long scenes because yes, this movie is about B and Ben, but you could at least, remind us that they're related. Like, when I started writing the script for this video, I had to go back and check to see what Pete's relationship was to Claudia and Hallie. On to Margaret. She could have been B's first love, but she's like a hippie and doesn't like to be tied down, so it was more one-sided because, she's not a commitment type of girl and wants to start sleeping with Ben again. She finds out that Ben and B have history together and that their date happened while he was still seeing her. And she also notices he has feelings for her now. This makes her decide to go back to Beau because she doesn't want to disrespect the girl code thing. And that way we can avoid the women being bitches to each other over a guy cliche. 8. The cake scene. Instead of having every conflict be the fault of an animal or dumb misunderstandings, have the characters be more participatory in their actions. Instead of having the dog knock it down, just change the scene to where B and Margaret are holding the cake the entire fight. And B keeps almost dropping her side of it until eventually, splat. Better conflict makes the apology warranted and better conflict. I don't know what else to say. Also, we know she's supposed to be clumsy, so would have tied that in as well. Lastly, the Titanic thing. Why not just go full cliche and have B be a huge fan of Titanic, so that scene can actually feel special? I don't even mind her being the one to suggest it. It could be one of those things where she knows it's lame, but she low-key has always wanted to do that, and maybe he catches on and this endears her to him even more. Instead of him just jumping down like an asshole, I thought it would maybe be funnier if, say, another spider was crawling up on him, and that's why he jumped down and accidentally knocks her into the water. I don't know, it would have at least felt less orchestrated. In conclusion, I will say I didn't put this video out because I just wanted to be negative. I enjoy talking about movies, even ones that are bad, and I think constructive movie criticism is important if we want to see better movies, especially rom-coms, and I do. I really do. I am not a rom-com hater, I just think the genre deserves a little more respect, and I think we as an audience deserve that too. Rating this film as the movie that's going to bring back rom-coms only for it to essentially be a Netflix rom-com is so cruel because they really gave us some high expectations and they did not live up to any of them in any way, shape, or form. The movie and the team behind it were way too confident in this lackluster project. But it has very mixed reviews. Some people think it's the best movie ever, and some people think it's the worst. However you feel, I'm still going to add it to the worst rom-coms to ever rom-com Hall of Fame, right next to Something Borrowed. It doesn't top Something Borrowed though, because Something Borrowed is at least entertainingly bad. The supporting characters are horribly written, but they at least have some personalities, and the morals of the film are what gets your blood boiling. And Anyone But You doesn't even have some weird morals ingrained in it that we can bitch about. And that is the real crime here. I'd like to close this video with a quote from Alicia Mogul's review of the movie. Anyone But You lacks vigor and steam. It's all gesticulation toward what it thinks a rom-com is, as though it were distracting from its own lack of substance, and therefore fails as one itself, feeling more of a color-by-numbers approach to the genre. The film, though it says all the right words, is far removed from the sweetness and love of all of our favorite romantic comedies. Cheers to that, bro.